Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to be doing a college algebra practice final exam review. And this review in particular is 40 questions, so what I'm going to do is split this video into 4 parts. In this part, we're going to be going through numbers 1 through 10. In the second part, we're going to be going through numbers 11 through 20. In the third part, we're going to be going through numbers 21 through 30. And in the fourth part, which is the last part, we're going to be going through numbers 31 through 40. And in the description below, I will have the link to all those parts. That way you can click on them whenever you're ready and skip around to whatever you need. But also what I'm going to do is I'm also going to list the timestamps of each question that we go over in each part in the description. And I'm going to list the topic of that question. For example, if number 1 is solving exponential equations, I'll put number 1, exponential equations, in the timestamp. That way you can skip around to problems you really need help with rather than sit for the whole video, unless you need it. But with that being said, we're going to jump into our first problem of our practice exam. So for number 1, it says, which of the following is a factor of 5x squared minus 17x plus 6? So I'm just going to write that down over here. Alright, so we have 5x squared minus 17x plus 6, and they want us to know which of the following is a factor of this. So the first thing we need to do is we need to factor this trinomial. So what I'm going to do is I actually do this technique where I make an x. So I'm going to make an x real quick. Alright guys, so I made my x, and what we're going to do is we're going to, well first let's look at this. We have 5x squared minus 17x plus 6. If you notice, our leading coefficient, which is 5, it's 5, it's not 1. So typically, if we can, we like to factor it so our leading coefficient is 1 because it just makes it easier. However, we see we have 5x squared, we have negative 17x, and we have 6. Unfortunately, all these terms, they have nothing in common where we can factor something out, so we're going to have to leave it as is, but no worries. So as you see, whenever we have our leading coefficient being something besides 1, what we're going to do is we're going to actually multiply our 5, or the leading coefficient, and we're going to multiply that by the last term, which in this case is 6. And we're going to take their product, 5 times 6, which is 30, and we're going to put it at the top of our x. At the bottom of our x, we're going to just put our middle coefficient, which is negative 17, and we're just going to put negative 17 here. Once we do this, we're going to find two numbers that multiply to give us the top, which is 30, and two numbers that add to give us negative 17, or the bottom. So two numbers that would work would be negative 15 and negative 2. Negative 15 times negative 2 is negative 30. Not negative 30, 30, my bad. And then negative 15 plus a negative 2 will give us negative 17. So those two numbers work. So once we do this, we're going to actually factor. So when we factor, remember our leading coefficient was 5, so we're going to start off with 5x, and then we're going to use our numbers that we found. So one of the numbers that we found was negative 15, so we're going to say minus 15, and then times 5x again, and then this time we're going to put minus 2 because negative 2 was our second number that we found on the side. So we have 5x minus 15 times 5x minus 2. So you might think we're done, but we're not. When we have this scenario where we have our leading coefficient something other than 1, we are usually going to have to take a further step and factor a little more. So if you notice, we have 5x minus 15 times 5x minus 2. And if you look, our 5x minus 15, we can actually factor that and take out a 5. So we're going to factor our 5x minus 15. And when we do that, we'll be left with x minus 3 times 5x minus 2. Once we take out that 5, it becomes irrelevant. So we're just going to cancel that out. And basically, our final answer would be x minus 3 times 5x minus 2. And that would be our answer. However, they gave us one of the factorizations, so based on their answer choices, the one that matches up with what we have is b, which is x minus 3, and as you see when we factor that, we have x minus 3 as well. So basically, this x minus 3 will be our answer. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our next problem, which is number 2. Alright guys, so for number 2, it says simplify the expression x squared times x times y to the negative 3 times z to the negative 2 all over x to the negative 2 times y times z to the negative 1. So I'm going to write that down real quick. Alright, so I wrote down the expression. Now it wants us to simplify this. So the first thing we're going to do, if you notice, we have x squared, and then in parentheses we have x times y all to the negative 3. So what I'm going to do is distribute this negative 3 to the x and the y. So I'm going to rewrite that. So when we rewrite that, it'll become x squared, and then times x to the negative 3, and times y to the negative 3, times z to negative 2, and then all over x to the negative 2 times y times z to negative 1. Alright, so now that we've done that, we're next going to simplify our numerator a little bit. So if you look, in our numerator we have x squared times x to the negative 3. We can actually combine those x's. So we can combine those x's. We're going to just combine those. So when we combine those x's, remember, when we combine them, when you multiply exponents, it's really adding. So this is the same thing as saying x to the 2 plus a negative 3 times y to the negative 3 times z to the negative 2 all over x to the negative 2 times y times z to the negative 1. And when we do that, x to the 2 plus negative 3, that will just turn into x to the negative 1 times y to the negative 3 times z to the negative 2 all over x to the negative 2 times y times z to the negative 1. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do, we have x to the negative 1 times y to the negative 3 times z to the negative 2 all over x to the negative 2 times y times z to the negative 1. Since we're dividing, what we're going to do is I'm first going to split these up and match up with the terms, I guess you can say. So we're going to split this up. So when we split this up, we can rewrite this to become x to the negative 1 divided by x to the negative 2 times y to the negative 3 all over y times z to the negative 2 all over z to the negative 1. And remember, when we divide exponents, we're really subtracting. So we can also rewrite this now to become, we have x to the negative 1 divided by x to the negative 2. That's the same thing as saying x to the negative 1 minus a negative 2. We also have y to the negative 3 divided by y, and that's the same thing as saying y to the negative 3 minus, we don't have it there, but that's technically a 1, so that's just going to be minus 1. And then lastly, we have z to the negative 2 all over z to the negative 1, which is the same thing as saying z to the negative 2 minus a negative 1. So once we get to this point, we're just going to basically simplify. So x to the negative 1 minus a negative 2, that's going to turn into basically x to the positive 1, because that's the same thing as saying x to the negative 1 plus 2. So that'll be x to the 1. And then we have over here, we have y to the negative 3 minus 1, and negative 3 minus 1 is negative 4. So that will turn into y to the negative 4. And then lastly, we have our z. It's z to the negative 2 minus a negative 1, and negative 2 minus a negative 1 is saying negative 2 plus 1. So that'll turn into z to the negative 1. Okay, so we're almost done. In the problem, it said it did not want us to leave any negative exponents. So what we're going to do is rewrite this again. Remember, x to the 1 is the same thing as saying x, but we have y to the negative 4, and we can rewrite that to become 1 all over y to the 4th. And then we have times z to the negative 1. Once again, we can rewrite that to become 1 all over z. And then when we simplify this, x times 1 over y to the 4th times 1 over z is just going to give us an output of x all over y to the 4th times z. And that will be our answer. And I believe the answer choice that corresponds to what we got is A. So the answer for that one would be A. Alright, so now we're going to move on to number 3. Okay, so for number 3, it says simplify the radicals and combine like terms in the square root of 75 minus the square root of 3 all over 4. So I'm going to write that down real quick. Alright guys, so as you see, we have the square root of 75 minus the square root of 3 all over 4. So in order to combine our radicals, our goal is going to find a like base for our radicals. And in order to do that, our best bet to do is simplify our radicals. So what I'm first going to do is simplify our square root of 75. So if we were to simplify our square root of 75, we're just going to find two numbers that multiply to give us 75. And two numbers that I think of is 3 and 25. And then we're going to just keep breaking it down. The 3, we're going to leave that as is, but we can break down a 25 to become 5 and 5. Once we do this, it's broken down as much as possible, so we're just going to see what we're left. Remember, when we're simplifying a radical, we're looking, in this case, when we have a base of square root, we're looking for pairs of the same number. So as you see, we only have one pair of 5s, so that's going to go on the outside of our radical. So basically, when we rewrite our square root to 75, that'll basically be 5 times the square root, and the only thing that's left is 3, so we're going to write the 3 here. We're now going to go back and try to simplify our square root of 3 all over 4. So when looking at this, we can actually rewrite our square root of 3 over 4. So let me just rewrite it down here. Okay, so we can actually rewrite this. Based off radical rules, we can rewrite this to become the square root of 3 all over the square root of 4. And we can further simplify the square root of 3 all over the square root of 4. The square root of 3, we're just going to leave that as is, but the square root of 4 is actually 2. And we can also rewrite this to become basically 1/2. This is the same thing as saying 1/2 times the square root of 3. And as you see now, they both have a like base of root 3. And when they have a like base, we can now combine them. So this is basically going to be 5 root 3 minus 1/2 times the square root of 3. And when we simplify that, that is going to be basically 9/2 root 3, or you can do 4.5 times the square root of 3. Both answers are acceptable, but I think in the answer choice, the one that lines up with what we have is the 4.5 times the square root of 3. So that would be answer choice. That would be answer choice C. So basically the answer for this one is going to be 4.5 times the square root of 3. Alright guys, so now we're going to move on to number 4. Alright guys, so for number 4, it says solve the equation x squared minus 8x equal to 9 and calculate the sum of the solutions. So I'm going to write down this problem real quick. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is when we're solving for equations, what we want to do is set everything equal to 0. So I'm just going to subtract 9 on both sides in order to do this. And when we do that, this will cancel out, the 9's will cancel out, and we'll be left with x squared minus 8x minus 9 equal to 0. So once we do this, we have x squared minus 8x minus 9. So what we have to do now is we're going to have to factor this. And when we factor, like I said before, a method that really helps me is I do this, I don't know if this is the actual name, but I do this x factoring method. So what I'm going to do is make an x real quick. So when we factor this, what we're going to do is, as you see, we have x squared minus 8x minus 9. The leading coefficient is 1, so that makes it really easy. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our last term, negative 9, at the top of our x. And we're going to put our middle coefficient, negative 8, at the bottom of our x. And then we're going to find two numbers that multiply to give us negative 9 and add to give us negative 8. And those two numbers would be negative 9 and positive 1, because negative 9 times 1 equals negative 9, and negative 9 plus positive 1 will give us negative 8. So now that we've done that, we can actually factor. So when we factor, this will just be, the leading coefficient is 1, so we'll just factor it to become x, and then with minus 9, because we found negative 9 is one of the numbers, and then x, and this is positive 1, so we'll just do plus 1. So once we do that, we're going to set both of our factors equal to 0, so this will be x minus 9 equal to 0, and x plus 1 equal to 0 to solve for x. And when we do that, this will just become, we'll add 9 on both sides, and that will become x equal to positive 9, and then we'll subtract 1 on both sides, and that will be x equal to negative 1. Now, they wanted the sum of the solutions, so basically our sum is going to be equal to 9 plus negative 1, which is just going to be positive 8. And the answer choice that correlates with what we got is answer choice D. So basically the answer is just going to be 8. And that concludes question number, I think it was 4. Yes. Okay guys, so now we're going to move on to number 5. Alright guys, so for question number 5, it says we are given that f of x is an odd function and g of x is an even function. Also f of 3 equals 6 and g of 3 equals 11. What is the value of f of negative 3 plus g of negative 3? So I'm going to write down all this information real quick. Alright guys, so we're given that we have f of x is odd and g of x is even, f of 3 is 6, and g of 3 is 11. And they basically want us to compute what f of negative 3 plus g of negative 3 is. So what's important is to take note that f of x is odd. So if you remember, in general, when we're given an odd function, basically, since they want us to find what f of negative 3 is, we know that we don't know what f of negative 3 is, but we do know that since they gave us f of 3, f of negative 3, because it's odd, is going to be basically a negative times f of 3. And then because g of x is even, they didn't give us g of negative 3. But we know in general when we're given an even function, if we don't have g of negative 3, we also have g of 3 though. So that's the same thing as saying g of 3, negative 3 is going to be equal to g of 3 since it's even. So when we compute what f of negative 3 plus g of negative 3 is, that's just going to be equal to a negative times whatever f of 3 is, which is 6, plus g of 3, which is 11. And negative 6 plus 11 is going to give us a positive 5. And that will basically be the answer to number 5. And the answer choice that corresponds with that is answer choice C. Alright guys, so now we're going to move on to question number 6. Alright guys, so for question number 6, it says Emily invests in a bank paying 5% simple interest. And it says her sister Charlotte invests $500 more than Emily in accounts paying 7% interest. And their combined interest at the end of the year was $311. How much did Emily invest? So I'm going to write down some important information that I gathered from this problem. So I'll write that down real quick. Alright guys, so I wrote down all the information that was important for this problem. So one thing I took note is that Emily, she invested 5% interest. And then it said Charlotte, she invested $500 more than Emily at 7% interest, and also their combined total was $311. And it's wondering how much did Emily invest? So basically, the spotlight is on Emily. They want to know, it's all about Emily, okay? So we're going to let X be represented by Emily. So we're going to let X be Emily's basically initial amount. So when we set up this equation, we know that their combined amounts was $311. So we're going to write this as 0.05 times X, which represents Emily's interest times her initial amount. And then we're going to do plus Charlotte's interest, which was 0.07 times, because her initial amount was $500 more than Emily, we're going to do X plus 500. And then we know that both their combined interest was equal to $311. Alright, so what we're going to do is just solve for X. So the first thing I'm going to do is distribute this 0.07 to the X and the 500. And when we do that, we'll get 0.05X plus 0.07X, and 0.07 times 500 will give us 35. So that'll be plus 35 equal to 311. 0.05x plus 0.07x will give us 0.12x, and then we'll be left with plus 35 equal to 311. We're going to subtract 35 on both sides, and we'll get 0.12x equal to, and 311 minus 35 is 276. From here, we're just going to divide by 0.12 on both sides. And when we do that, we'll get X equal to 276 divided by 0.12 will give us $2,300. And basically, this means that Emily's initial amount was $2,300. And the answer choice that corresponds with that is answer choice B. Alright guys, so now we're going to move on to number 7. Alright guys, so for number 7, it says quantity y varies inversely with the square of x. Y has a value 6 when x is 3. When x equals 6, what is the corresponding value of y? So I'm going to write down this information real quick. Okay, so what I wrote down, this is going to be in a variation problem, and in this particular one, this is going to be inverse variation. And I'll put the formula on the screen as a reminder. So it says y varies inversely with the square of x. And it also says when x is 3, y is 6. And they want us to find what is y when x is equal to 6. So the first thing we need to do is we need to find what is this formula. So our formula that we're going to use to solve for y is going to be y equal to, remember this is inverse variation, so this is going to be k all over, and it says it varies inversely with the square of x, so it's going to be all over x squared. The first thing we're going to do, this is going to be kind of a two-step process. We're going to have to solve for k first in order to solve for y, and in order to do that, what we're going to do is plug in the point that they gave us. They said when x is 3, y is 6, so we're going to plug in 6 for y, and we're going to plug in 3 for x. So when we do that, we'll just simplify this. It'll be 6 equal to k all over, and 3 squared is 9. Then we'll multiply by 9 on both sides. The 9 will cancel out over here, and we'll get basically k equal to 9 times 6 is 54. Okay, so now that we have that, we're going to rewrite our equation. Okay, so I rewrote our equation. Now that we found k, to complete what our equation is, we have y equal to 54 all over x squared. And they want us to find what y is when x is equal to 6. So we're just going to plug in 6 into our x. So that'll be y equal to 54 all over 6 squared. That will simplify to 54 all over 6 squared is 36. And if we were to simplify the 54 over 36, we would get 3 halves. And that's basically what our y is going to be. And the answer choice that corresponds with this is answer choice C. Alright guys, so now we're going to move on to number 8. Okay guys, so for number 8 it says solve the equation x plus 3 equal to the square root of 30x plus 34. And it says which statement describes the solution set best. So I'm just going to write down this equation real quick. Alright guys, so I wrote down the equation. So we have x plus 3 equal to the square root of 30x plus 34. So remember, our goal is to solve for x. However, we do have a radical on our right side. So let's first try to get rid of this radical. And in order to do that, what we're going to do is square everything. So we're going to square this whole equation. And when we do that, that will become x plus 3 squared equal to the square root of 30x plus 34 squared. So when we do that, we have x plus 3 squared. I'm actually going to expand that by foiling. So remember, if we were to foil this, x plus 3 squared, we can rewrite that as x plus 3 times x plus 3. And remember, FOIL is going to be first, outside, inside, and last. So x times x is going to be x squared. X times 3 is going to be plus 3x. 3 times x is going to be plus 3x. And then 3 times 3 is going to be plus 9. And when we simplify that, that'll be x squared, and 3x plus 3x is 6x, and then plus 9. So I'm going to rewrite that over here. So we can rewrite our x plus 3 squared to become x squared plus 6x plus 9 equal to, and the square root of 30x plus 34 squared, the radical will actually cancel out and it'll just leave us with 30x plus 34. The next thing we want to do is we want to set everything equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 30x and 34 on both sides. And when I do that, we're going to do 9 minus 34. That will give us a, well, let me just write down the x squared. Okay, let me just do it in order. So 6x minus 30x, that will give us a minus 24x. And 9 minus 34 is going to give us a negative 25. And it'll be all equal to 0. So the next thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to factor this. We have x squared minus 25x minus 25. So once again, I'm going to use that technique where we use the x. So I'm going to draw an x real quick. Okay guys, so I drew our x. Remember, at the top of our x, we're going to put our last term, which is negative 25. And at the bottom, we're going to put our middle coefficient, which is negative 24. And we're going to find two numbers that multiply to give us negative 25 and add to give us negative 24. And two numbers that I can think of would be negative 25 and positive 1. Negative 25 times 1 is negative 25. And negative 25 plus 1 is going to give us negative 24. Okay, so when we factor that, that will become x, and then minus 25, and then x, and because we found positive 1, that will be plus 1. And we'll set these, both our factors equal to 0, so that will be x minus 25 equal to 0, and x plus 1 equal to 0. And we'll just solve for x. So when we solve for x, that will be, we'll just add 25 on both sides. This will cancel out and leave us with x equal to 25. And then we'll subtract 1 on both sides. And we'll get x equal to negative 1. So basically, our solutions is going to be x equal to 25 and x equal to negative 1. And the answer choice that matches up with that is going to be, okay, so for the one that would match up would be answer choice B, because it says there are positive and negative solutions, and we have x equals 25, which is positive, and we have x equal negative 1, which is negative. So answer choice B would be the answer to that one. Alright guys, so now we're going to move on to number 9. Alright guys, so for number 9 it says what is the equation of the line passing through the center of the circle x minus 3 squared plus y plus 2 squared equal to 12 and having an x-intercept of 2, 0. So I'm going to write down all this information real quick. Alright guys, so I wrote everything down that was important. So they basically want us to find the equation of a line that passes through the center of our circle and the x-intercept to 0. Now, when you see this, you're like, we have an equation of circle, we have this, it's a y, we're probably going to have to do something with the circle. No. The only thing we need to do from this equation of the circle is dissect what the center is. So if you look, we have x minus 3 squared and y plus 2. Inside. We know our center is going to come from these points right here, so one of it is going to be, we have right here, -3. We know whenever it's in the inside, it's going to be the opposite sign, so basically the center of our our x value is going to be +3. And then if we look at our second point, we have a +2. We know it's always going to be opposite of what it is, so that really means it's -2. So basically, the center of our y value is going to be -2. So now that we've done this, we're dealing with 2 points. We have our center of our circle, which is 3, -2, and we have our other point, which is the x-intercept of 2, 0. The only thing we need to do is basically find the slope. So remember, we're going to use our slope formula, which is m equal to y2 minus y1 all over x2 minus x1. So when we do that, we're going to do m equal to y2 is 0 minus a -2, which is y1, all over x2, which is 2 minus 3, which is our x1. 0 minus -2, that's like saying 0 plus 2, which is going to be 2. And 2 minus 3 is going to be -1. And when we simplify that, that'll become -2. So now we have our slope. So to complete this equation, we just have to find our y-intercept. So there's 2 ways you can find the y-intercept. One way is to use your slope-intercept equation, y equals mx plus b. So we have y equals mx plus b. And you just plug in one of the points that they gave us to solve for b and the slope. So I'm just going to use 2, 0. So we know that y is going to be equal to 0. Our m is -2, and we're just going to use 2 plus b, and we'll solve for b. That'll be 0 equal to -2 times 2 is -4 plus b. And then we'll add 4 on both sides. And we'll get b equal to +4. Therefore, when we plug everything in, we'll get y equal to -2x plus 4. The other way is to use point-slope equation. If you're not really comfortable with solving for b, you can just use point-slope, where you just use a point given. Once again, we can use 2, 0. And remember, that'll just be y minus whatever our y is, which is 0, equal to our slope, -2, times x minus 2 in this case. And then you just get it to slope-intercept form. So y minus 0 is y, -2 times x is -2x, and -2 times -2 is going to be +4. So as you see, both ways work to get it into slope-intercept form. It's just basically your preference, and basically the answer is y equal to -2x plus 4, and the answer choice that corresponds to that is answer choice D. Answer choice D is the one that lines up with what we got. Alright guys, so now we're going to move on to question number 10, which is the last question that we're going to be going over in this part. So for question number 10, it says what is the radius of the circle whose equation is x squared minus 4x plus y squared plus 14y minus 11 equal to 0. So I'm first going to write down this equation real quick. Okay, so the first thing we want to do, as you see, our circle right now is in general form. This is the general equation of a circle. In order to find what the radius is, we have to get it into standard form. And in order to get general form to standard form, what we're going to have to do is complete the square. So I'm going to write this. The first thing I'm going to do is just add the 11 to the other side. That way we can just have it to x's and y's. So that would be x squared minus 4x. I'm going to leave a space, and then we'll do plus y squared plus 11, not 11, sorry, plus 14y plus a space, and then we'll have that equal to 11. Okay, so when we complete the square, basically what we're going to do is we're going to take our middle coefficient, -4, divide that by 2, and then we're going to square it. We're going to do the same thing for our y's. We're going to take our middle coefficient, 14, divide that by 2, and square it. When we do that, we'll get x squared minus 4x. -2 divided by 2 is going to give us -2, and -2 squared is going to be plus 4. And then we'll do the y. Y squared plus 14y. 14 divided by 2 is 7, and 7 squared is 49. Since we added 4 and 49, remember we have to do the same on this side. So we're going to do plus 4 and plus 49. Once we do that, we're going to basically factor what we did over here and right here. So when we factor, that'll just become x. Remember when we do this, our number that we factor to is going to be the number that we found inside the parentheses in here, right here. And the number we found, -4 divided by 2, is -2. So this will factor to basically x minus 2, and then times x minus 2, which is going to be x minus 2 squared. And then plus, for our y, remember we found the inside to be 14 over 2. 14 over 2 is 7, so basically factor to x plus 7 times x plus 7. Over here, 11 plus 4 plus 49. 11 plus 4 plus 49 is going to give you 64. And we can rewrite this, x plus 7 times x plus 7, that'll be x plus 7 squared. And then we'll have that equal to 64. Remember to find our radius. This, with our standard form, it's always going to be equal to r squared. So we're going to take our radius, it's basically our radius squared. So basically we can set this up as r squared equal to 64. And to solve for r, we'll just take the square root, and r will equal to 8. And that will be our answer for number 10. And the answer choice that corresponds to that is answer choice A. Alright, so that concludes part 1 of this video. Once again, I will link all the other parts in the descriptions. I will have part 2, part 3, and part 4 in the description. That way you can jump directly to those parts. But that is everything. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comments below. And take care.